Welcome to the Alien Probe Podcast. Today we'll be discussing UFO history. In popular culture, the term UFO, or unidentified flying object, refers to a suspected alien spacecraft. Although its definition encompasses any unexplained aerial phenomena, UFO sightings have been reported throughout the recorded history and in various parts of the world, raising questions about life on other planets and whether extraterrestrials have visited Earth. They became a major subject of interest and inspiration behind numerous films, books following the development of rocketry after World War II. Currently, we have listeners in 5 countries and are growing all the time. Sometimes I think we take for granted the awareness of the history of UFO sightings by a younger generation, and as technology brings the countries of our world closer than ever, the awareness of the story by those folks as well. So let's kind of sum up what we do know. Welcome back, Deb. We're talking flying saucers today.
Yay, Doug. Let's talk flying saucers.
You know I'm excited.
I know you are.
It's one of my favorite topics of conversation, even though, we're going to discuss today what we don't know, but just kind of, like I said, kind of a history so that, everybody, knows what's been going on up to this point.
So would you like me to talk about flying saucers?
Why don't you start talking about some flying saucer stuff?
The first well-known UFO sightings occurred in 1947 when businessman Kenneth Arnold claimed to see a group of 9 high-speed objects near Mount Rainier in Washington while flying his small plane. We're going to talk a little more about Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold's going to be discussed probably about 3 times throughout this segment.
He comes up a lot. He estimated the speed of the crescent-shaped objects as several thousand miles per hour and said they moved like saucers skipping on water. In the newspaper report that followed, it was mistakenly stated that the objects were saucer-shaped, which began the term flying saucer.
So that's where it began. That's where the term flying saucer began, why it began, in case everybody was wondering. Up next, we're going to talk about the Roswell Ufo Incident, which has been beat to death by news and folklore and everything else. So we're going to kind of go over it. And there are those out there I know that really aren't familiar with the story, so we'll kind of do a rundown.
Kind of start at the beginning.
Yep, that's where it began. One morning around Independence Day, 1947. Independence Day? Okay, about 75 miles from the town of Roswell, New Mexico, a rancher named Mac Brazel found something unusual in his sheep pasture. A mess of metallic sticks held together by tape, chunks of plastic and foil reflectors, and scraps of a heavy, glossy, paper-like material. Now, tape, I don't think, aliens, like you said.
Stop by the dollar store.
Dollar stores, pick up some tape, just something to hold the ship together. I mean, that segment there was probably put together by somebody who was trying to lean people towards one side of the story or another. Anyway, unable to identify the strange objects, Brazel called Roswell sheriff. The sheriff, in turn, called officials at the nearby Roswell Army Air Force Base. Soldiers fanned out across Brazel's field, gathering the mysterious debris and whisking it away in armored trucks. Although officials from the local Air Force Base asserted that it was a crashed weather balloon, many people believed it was the remains of an extraterrestrial flying saucer. A series of secret dummy drops in New Mexico during the 1950s heightened their suspicions. The flames of conspiracy were further fanned in the 1950s when the dummies with latex skin and aluminum bones that looked eerily like aliens fell from the sky across New Mexico and were hurriedly picked up by military vehicles. To those who believed in the earlier Roswell sightings, this seemed to be like a government cover-up. For the Air Force, these dummies were a way to test new ways for pilots to survive falls, which we'll kind of go over in a little bit.
Like giving them latex skin and aluminum bones?
Yeah, it was discussed by witnesses. The debris field was phenomenally large.
But what would sending a dummy out of a plane teach you about how to survive a fall?
They had mechanisms, and they wanted to make it look like a person, and it had allegedly they had mechanism inside the body, to log the various, atmospheric conditions that would be a person would be subjected to.
Because it's not like they were wearing a special suit that might help them.
No, and it's
survive a fall.
Yeah, but people jump out of aircraft and they have a special military. I don't know if it's Air Force or Army, but they'll jump from huge. I forget what they call it. They have a term for it. Huge, just way the hell up, and they'll jump down and parachute. Okay. It's crazy. 50 years later, the military issued a subsequent statement admitting that the Roswell wreckage was part of Project Mogul. The Project Mogul team invented a number of high-tech materials for its balloons and other equipment, including ultra-lightweight and ultra-strong metals, fiber optic cables, and fireproof fabrics. This is part of the reason why some people who saw the debris thought it came from outer space. It didn't look or behave like anything they'd ever seen. Many of these materials are still in use today, which we think fiber optics are something that it's been discussed that fiber optics were something that we got from the alien spacecraft. Because in the 50s, between the 50s and the 60s, technology just went explosive. Right. So, it stands to reason that we all of a sudden got this technology from somewhere else.
That's a scary thought.
It turned out that the Army knew more about Brazel's flying saucer than it let on. Since World War II, a group of geophysicists and oceanographers from Columbia University, New York University, and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution on Cape Cod had been working on a top-secret atomic espionage project at New Mexico's Alamogordo airfield that they called Project Mogul. And that's kind of when we were talking about when did the saucers start coming around. And now we're seeing that now we're just starting this nuclear program probably, and then they're curious wherever they came from. Did they come from outer space? Did they come from inner Earth? Did they come from under the ocean? Wherever these things are coming from, all of a sudden they're saying, maybe they came from the future, they're saying, this is the point which we frickin' destroyed ourselves. Let's try to push a little something different. That's just could be a theory, but anyway, Project Mogul used the sturdy high altitude balloons to carry low frequency sound system sensors. This is the same thing we were talking about with the dummies into the tropopause, a faraway part of the Earth's atmosphere that acts as a sound channel. In this part of the atmosphere, sound waves can travel for thousands of miles without interference, much like under the ocean. The scientists believe that if they sent microphones into the sound channel, they would be able to eavesdrop on nuclear tests as far away as the Soviet Union. So again, everybody, it's not just us. Other places they're doing, other places the Soviet Union was, doing their nuclear research.
Well, according to the U.S. military, the debris in Brazel's field outside Roswell actually belonged to Project Mogul. It was the remains of a 700-foot-long string of neoprene balloons, radar reflectors, which were used for tracking, and sonic equipment that the scientists had launched from the Alamogordo base in June and that had evidently crashed in early July 1947.
Again, it took a week at least to go across one state? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Maybe there was no wind.
It was just in the troposphere.
The troposphere.
The wind, I think it's a little faster even up there, the jet stream.
If it got that far up, because normally these guys, hit a power line, short out power in the neighborhood for a while, and then kill some birds or, the fish in the ocean.
Yeah. Well, down there, the thing was in the middle of nowhere when it crashed, but they said that there's so much debris it couldn't possibly. And the balloon came down and exploded. And
700 feet of balloons.
Yeah, but when it came, so let's say the thing came down out of the clouds, right. From the sphere, and all of a sudden decides to crash right there near Roswell. And there was this debris field, and every time they show the debris field, from what the witnesses said, that the thing was literally in pieces. and there was parts of this thing scattered across. Then they say debris field. A balloon's gonna pop or whatever. And did all of them pop and just land?
Maybe the sheep did it.
Yeah, the sheep, and then the sheep ripped them apart after they went in there. So I don't know. So yeah.
Well, because the project was highly classified, no one at the Roswell Army Airfield even knew that it existed. And they had no idea what to make of the objects Brazel had found. In fact, some officials on the base were worried that the wreckage had come from a Russian spy plane or satellite, information they were understandably reluctant to share with the public. The weather balloon story, flimsy though it was the simplest and most plausible explanation they could come up with on short notice. Meanwhile, to protect the scientists' secret project, no one at Alamogordo could step in and clear up the confusion.
Yeah. So Roswell and flying saucerism today. Today, many people continue to believe that the government and the military are covering up the truth about alien landings at and around Roswell. In 1994, the Pentagon declassified most of the files on Project Mogul and the dummy drops, and the Federal General Accounting Office produced a report of Air Force research regarding the Roswell incident, designed to debunk these rumors. Nevertheless, there are still people who subscribe to the UFO theory, and hundreds of thousands of curiosity seekers visit Roswell and the crash site every year, hoping to find the truth for themselves. And yes, we'll be going.
Or at least a T-shirt.
I'm going to get my T-shirt with the big green alien and the big black eyes.
Got to get your little green alien to bring home.
That's right. That's right.
Add it to your collection.
In the Soviet Union, sightings, and let's throw this in the Soviet Union, sightings of UFOs were often prompted by tests of secret military rockets.
So, Project Blue Book. It's a TV show.
Yes, a TV show that we started to watch, and that because Project Blue Book's been my life for so many years. I just feel like I just feel like I lived it. And it's a good show. I don't want to put the show down. It just wasn't something. We'll give it another. I think we'll give it another try from the beginning.
Yeah.
You weren't really. I mean, that wasn't really a thing because of the fact that it goes off on these weird.
We'll try it.
Yeah, I think it's worth doing another watch.
Well, sightings of unidentified aerial phenomenon increased, and in 1948, the U.S. Air Force began an investigation of these reports that they called Project Sign. Cold War tension was mounting, and the initial opinion of those involved with the project was that UFOs were most likely sophisticated Soviet aircraft. Although some researchers suggested that they might be spacecraft from other worlds, the so-called extraterrestrial hypotheses, or ETH, which we will use that later.
And also there was Project Saucer in the book I'm reading, and I've mentioned this in previous episodes, UFOs Are Real by Donald Kehoe. He was an officer in the military assigned to investigating the phenomena of the UFO phenomena. Yeah, definitely Saucer was in there. Project Saucer was not you don't see that as much as Blue Book, but it is out there. I'm not sure why I looked it up and it isn't very prominent, but still did kind of the same thing.
Well, within a year, Project Sign was succeeded by Project Grudge, which in 1952 was itself replaced by the longest-lived of the official inquiries into UFOs, Project Blue Book. It was headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. From 1952 to 69, Project Blue Book compiled reports of more than 12,000 sightings or events, each of which was ultimately classified as, 1, identified with a known astronomical, atmospheric, or artificial human-caused phenomenon, or 2, unidentified. The latter category, approximately 6% of the total, included cases for which there was insufficient information to make it, to explain it. In June of 1947, while flying a small plane, businessman and civilian pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 objects moving at high speeds through the skies, and we've talked about him before, over Washington's Mount Rainier. Widely publicized reports of Arnold's experience, followed by an increasing number of reported UFO sightings, led the U.S. Air Force to begin an investigation into the sightings called Operation Sign in 1948.
Yeah, we're going to talk about. He's going to be mentioned a few times as we go through this, because as we talk about a different category, he's in a different, he's brought in. So it's unfortunately fortunately, it kind of gives us a good vision of the time frame that everything is. The initial investigation resulted in the formation of Project Blue Book in 1952. That project became the longest running of the U.S. government's official inquiries into UFO sightings, compiling more than 12,000 sightings or related events from 1952 to its dismantling in 1969. In the early sightings, though reports of mysterious flying objects often attributed to spirits, angels, phantoms, ghosts, or other supernatural phenomena have existed for centuries, World War II and the accompanying development of rocket science marked a new level of interest in what would officially become known as unidentified flying objects. The first well-known UFO sighting occurred in 1947 in June, when civilian pilot, here's Kenneth Arnold again, reported seeing the 9 objects in V formations on Rainier. Did you know that Kenneth Arnold compared the movements of the 9 mysterious objects? Okay. We know that he kind of coined the phrase flying saucer, so we don't need to go into that again.
So then there was a formation of Project Blue Book and the Robertson Panel. The Air Force's UFO-related inquiries took place against a backdrop of frenzied popular interest in the strange flying objects, which reached its peak soon after Project Blue Book began in 1951. As we said, it was headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, and it became the longest running of the U.S. government's official inquiries into UFOs. Alarmed by the striking number of UFO sightings reported in 1952, the administration of President Harry S. Truman feared an outbreak of hysteria over the issue in 1953. The Central Intelligence Agency responded to those fears by assembling an expert panel of scientists headed by physicist H.P. Robertson of the California Institute of Technology to discuss the UFO issue. The panel concluded that there was no basis for so-called extraterrestrial hypotheses and that UFOs pose no security threat.
The Robertson panel and the Condom Report, another aspect of history, an American obsession with the UFO phenomenon was underway in the hot summer of 1952. A provocative series of radar and visual sightings occurred near National Airport in Washington, D.C. Although these events were attributed to temperature inversions in the air over the city, of course they were, not everyone was convinced by this explanation. You look up there, I see this, and that was a temperature invert.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you see the temperature change when you look up.
Well, back in the 50s, they could tell you anything, and you'd be like, yeah, okay. I guess that's, they know more than we. The whole attitude was, well, the government knows more than we do, so obviously that's what it was. Meanwhile, the number of UFO reports had climbed to a record high. I think more people were looking up. Holy shit.
Well, we put planes up there. So
yeah. Look up. This led the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, to prompt the U.S. government to establish an expert panel of scientists to investigate the phenomenon. The panel was headed by H.P. Robertson, a physicist at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, California, and included other physicists and astronomer, and a rocket engineer. When the Robertson panel met for 3 days in 1953, they interviewed military officers and the head of Project Blue Book. They also reviewed films and photographs of UFOs. Their conclusions were that 90% of the sightings could be easily attributed to astronomical or meteorological phenomena, i.e. bright planets and stars, meteors, auroras, ion clouds, or to such earthly objects as aircraft, balloons, birds, and searchlights. 2, there was no obvious security threat. And 3, there was no evidence to support the ETH. Parts of the panel's report were kept classified until 1979, and this long period of secrecy helped fuel suspicions of a government cover-up. A second committee was set up in 1966 at the request of the Air Force to review the most interesting material gathered by Project Blue Book. 2 years later, this committee, which made a detailed study of 59 UFO sightings, released its results as Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects, also known as the Condom Report, named by Edward U. Condon, the physicist who headed the investigation. The Condom Report was revealed by a special committee of the National Academy of Sciences. A total of 37 scientists wrote chapters or parts of chapters for this report, which covered investigations of the 59 UFO sightings in detail. Like the Robertson panel, the committee concluded there was no evidence of anything other than commonplace phenomena in the reports, and that UFOs did not warrant further investigation. This, together with a decline in sighting activity, led to the dismantling of Project Blue Book in 1969.
The Condon Report. Over the next 17 years, Project Blue Book would compile reports of 12,618 UFO sightings or related events. Similarly to the Robertson panel, Blue Book would eventually classify more than 90% of these as identified, meaning they were caused by known astronomical, atmospheric, or artificial man-made phenomenon. The remaining 700 incidents remained unidentified. These included cases in which there was insufficient information to assign the event a known cause. In 1966, the Air Force had requested the formation of another committee to look into They keep saying that there's nothing to study.
There's nothing to look at.
And yet they keep studying
They keep
things.
studying. Because there's people out there going, I'm telling you, I saw this stuff. And they're like, no, it's Venus. No, it's a gas cloud. No, you're not seeing it. You're seeing all this other stuff. And all these people work for the government. They don't have any private, and they would never back in the 50s, but put a private, any private.
Any citizen in charge of this.
Any citizen in charge of this.
No, it's because the government signed.
We're only going to tell you what we want you to know. We're not going to even give you an inkling, but they keep coming back with more investigations.
Well, now this new committee is going to look into details of 59 of the UFO sightings that were originally investigated by Project Blue Book. This committee was headed by Dr. Edward Condon, and it was based at the University of Colorado. It released its Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects, better known as the Condom Report, in 1968. According to this report, the sightings they examined showed no evidence of any unusual activity and recommended that the Air Force stop investigations into UFO-related incidents. In 1969, in response to the Condom Report, as well as the declining number of UFO sightings, Project Blue Book was officially brought to an end. Among its conclusions were that of the sightings categorized as unidentified. There was no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that they were the result of technology beyond the range of modern scientific knowledge, or that they were extraterrestrial vehicles. Well, you said that in the Blue Book report, you said that in the Condon. You keep saying it, and then...
Well, it's important to note that UFOs have been reported in the private sector the entire time, private pilots, which you can't take away private. You could technically take away a private pilot's license by saying he's insane. He keeps seeing stuff. But, Air Force pilots, fighter pilots, well-known fighter pilots have seen these things. And then they get back to their base, they report it, and they're told, you didn't see that, and stop talking about it. And then you get airline pilots, same thing. They see it, the co-pilot sees it. I don't know if passengers have been reported seeing the same thing specifically, but then they get back, their company tells them, you didn't see that, and quit talking about it, or you're going to get your flight status pulled. It just, people just I don't know how long they figured it. I guess these things will just go away.
Well, but they won't.
And they won't, and really, they haven't been. I mean, I haven't, I've seen some weird stuff myself, but enough to think they're out there. I don't know what they're doing and why. I just don't know why you're with the technology and personal technology we have, such as our cell phones, that people, you see this stuff on TikTok and everything else, but crash UFO, you walk up with your phone on its camera and you walk up there you know, the aliens are on the ground dead or whatever, and we haven't seen any. I don't know. Are they being? Is it possible that they could be pulled out of there that fast after it gets up? Maybe I know they can track things by, you know, people, you know, texts and communications. Maybe they're monitoring that. I mean, that's real paranoid. But you know, could it be possible that they're? But are they really? And really, they shouldn't be crashing all over the place with this technology. I don't, you know.
Would you like me to talk about ufology?
Yes. Can you talk about ufology?
UFO. I like ufology.
Ufology, the study of UFOs.
UFOlogy. Well, despite this dismissive attitude expressed by the Condom Report and the subsequent dismantling of Project Blue Book, civilian investigations into UFOs continued, as many ufologists were dissatisfied with the government's conclusions. In 1974, astronomer J. Allen Hynek, who had served as an advisor to Project Blue Book, created the Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS. The organization continues to look into UFO sightings and to weigh the hypotheses that they could be evidence of extraterrestrial activity. In addition to UFO investigations conducted in the United States, similar work has been done over the years in other countries all over the world, including Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, Greece, and Sweden. In January 1979, the British House of Lords even held a 3-hour-long debate on the subject of UFOs and a motion, which was eventually defeated, that the British government should make public what it knew about them.
Yeah, why should they be any different than our government?
That would be so cool to have listened to that debate, though.
Yes.
Because did they ever say what they knew? And
I don't think anything was ever brought out in that. I don't think they talked about that. They just wanted it.
But now it's been this many years. Can they debate that again and maybe, you know, give us some information? Because that would be.
I think eventually it's going to come out. But what they said with this new thing with the COVID, with, you know, the COVID, what is it?
It's a bill that the president just signed that will require the government to release information on UFOs, which should be really interesting.
Yeah, and how much is it? I mean, as we read into this, it's going to be interesting to see what they release, and is it something that we really haven't found? We don't really know about from before. As we read through this entire thing, when it comes out, it's going to be like, we've already talked about this. This isn't news,
right?
You know, I mean, was Roswell really an alien spacecraft? I think the problem is, and it always has been, that the government thinks people are going to just freak out and there's going to be anarchy if they find out that, holy crap, there really was aliens, there really was UFOs.
Well, there are people that will.
You know, oh, of course there is, you know, and people freak out over nothing. They definitely will freak out over this. But, you know, I think we're at a stage now where I think we can accept the fact that this is happening. So, but I mean, there's all kinds of weird stuff out there, like, you know, our government's full of lizard-like, you know, they're really lizard-like creatures running the government. I mean, that's out there.
That's been in movies before.
But, you know, it's, you know, I don't know. It's just, I would like to see some transparency. But Area 51's the next category here. And this is another subject that's been, you know, with the, you know, Rush Area 51 or whatever it was, and that we had some months back.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's, you know, we want to know what's in there. We know that, you know, Joe Rogan and, you know, Bob Lazar had the interview. Bob Lazar was who had been at S4, which was part of Area 51, and saw 4 or 5 UFOs and did some reverse engineering. This is a story I believe wholeheartedly over all the others that they found. You know, they have UFOs. One of the UFOs was actually buried somewhere, that they were just digging some construction. The thing had been there for millennia. There's so many years that they dug it out and they brought it to Area 51. But in the 50s and 60s, multiple UFO sightings were reported around Area 51 in Nevada, a site used variously by the CIA, U.S. Air Force, and Lockheed Martin to test flights of experimental aircraft or black aircraft. Declassified documents show Area 51 was home to a Cold War program. Max would like to chime in.
Yeah, the dog is barking.
Max. Called Oxcart, dedicated to creating a spy plane that would be undetectable in the air and could be used to gather information behind the Iron Curtain. The resulting SR-71 Blackbird, my personal favorite, which isn't really flying anymore, the F-117 Nighthawk, and the Archangel 12, A-12, traveled at speeds upwards of 2,000 miles an hour. These mysterious planes helped fuel rumors that Area 51 was used to conduct experiments on extraterrestrial life and other spacecraft.
Other investigations of UFOs. Despite the failure of the ETH to make headway with the expert committees, a few scientists and engineers, most notably J. Allen Hynek, who was, as we know, an astronomer at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, who had been involved with Project Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book, concluded that a small fraction of the most reliable UFO reports gave definite indications for the presence of extraterrestrial visitors. Aside from Project Blue Book, the only other official and fairly complete records of UFO sightings were kept in Canada, where they were transferred in 1968 from the Canadian Department of National Defence to the Canadian National Research Council. The Canadian records comprised about 750 sightings. Less complete records have been maintained in the United Kingdom, Sweden, Denmark, Australia, and Greece. In the United States, Ufos and the Mutual of UFO Network, or MUFON, which
I am a card-carrying member.
Doug is a member.
That's right.
Bellevue, Colorado, continue to log sightings reported by the public. You're just waiting to log in a site, aren't you?
I'm on MUFON all the time.
In the Soviet Union, sightings of UFOs were often prompted by tests of secret military rockets. In order to obscure the true nature of the tests, the government sometimes encouraged the public to believe these rockets might be extraterrestrial craft, but eventually they decided that the descriptions themselves might give away too much information.
Yeah.
UFO sightings in China have been similarly provoked by military activity that's also unknown to the public.
Then there's the possible explanations for UFO sightings and alien abductions. UFO reports have varied widely in reliability, as judged by the number of witnesses, whether the witnesses were independent of each other, the observing conditions, i.e. IG in all, fog, haze, type of illumination, and the direction of sighting. Typically, witnesses who take the trouble to report a sighting consider the object to be of extraterrestrial origin, or possibly a military craft, but certainly under intelligent control. This interference is usually based on what is perceived as formation flying by sets of objects, unnatural, often sudden motions, the lack of sound, changes in brightness or color, and strange shapes. That the unaided eye plays tricks is well known. A bright light, such as the planet Venus, often appears to move. I often mistake Venus for a flying saucer.
Of course you do.
Astronomical aspects can also be disconcerting to drivers as they seem to follow the car. Visual impressions of distance and speed of UFOs are also highly unreliable because they are based on an assumed size and are often made against a blank sky with no background object, clouds, mountains, etc., to set a maximum distance. Reflections from windows and eyeglasses produce superimposed views, and complex optical systems such as camera lenses can turn point of sources of the light and apparently saucer-shaped phenomena.
It happens all the time. Just look through my glasses and see a UFO.
Such optical illusions and the do you see UFOs in your glasses?
That's what they're saying.
Their psychological desire to interpret images or images are known to account for many visual UFO reports, and at least some sightings are known to be hoaxes. Radar sightings, while in certain respects more reliable, fail to discriminate against artificial objects and meteor trails, ionized gas, rain, or thermal discontinuities in the atmosphere. Contact events such as abductions are often associated with UFOs because they are ascribed in the extraterrestrial visitors. However, the credibility of the ETH as an explanation for abductions is disputed by the most psychologists who have investigated this phenomenon. They suggest that a common experience known as sleep paralysis may be the culprit. As these cases, sleepers experience temporary immobility and belief that they are being watched. And I'm going to have you go over
Okay, we're going to talk about some UFO history. We're looking at Lower Egypt in ancient Egypt, 1440 BC. According to this is a document called the Tully Papyrus. The scribes of the pharaoh Thutmose III reported that fiery discs were encountered floating over the skies. The Condom Committee actually reviewed these documents and disputed their legitimacy, stating that Tully was taken in and the papyrus is a fake. And then we move to 218 BC, and we're in the Roman Republic of Rome, Italy, when Livy, who's an Italian philosopher, records a number of portents in the winter of this year, including what is in English translates to phantom ships had been seen gleaming in the sky. And then we go to 76 BC, where there's, in the Roman Republic, the event was called the spark from a falling star. According to Pliny the Elder, a spark fell from a star and grew as it descended until it appeared to be the size of the moon. And then it then ascended back up to the heavens and was transformed into a light. In 74 BC, we go to Pyrrhesia, Asia. According to Plutarch, a Roman army commanded by Lucullus was about to begin a battle with Mithridates VI of Pontus when, all on a sudden, the sky burst asunder and a huge flame-like body was seen to fall between the two armies. In shape, it was most like a wine jar, and in color like molten silver. Plutarch reports the shape of the object as a wine jar. The apparently silver object was reported by both armies.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, historian in 196 AD in Rome, the historian Cassius Dio described a fine rain resembling silver descended from a clear sky upon the Forum of Augustus. He used some of the material to plate some of his bronze coins, but by the fourth day afterwards, the silvery coating was gone.
That's freaky.
That is weird, huh?
Now we're
1561.
Well, yeah, we're no longer.
We're in a modern day. We're after death.
That's right.
Residents of Nuremberg saw what they described as an aerial battle, followed by the appearance of a large black triangular object and then a large crash outside the city. The broadsheet claims that witnesses observed hundreds of spheres, cylinders, and other odd-shaped objects that moved erratically overhead. Yeah, I saw a painting of this, and it was interesting. There was all kinds of, in the painting, the witness saw all kinds of different shapes of these.
I'll have to look that up.
You know, it's a really cool painting.
Okay, would you like to go? We can go to 1803.
1803, and we're not reading every single one of these. We're kind of skipping.
Yeah, there's
to the more interesting. There's some very, just mundane sightings, and these aren't every. I mean, this isn't every sighting that ever happened. There's hundreds of sightings happen all the time. These are things that were, apparently important enough to note in history.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, in ancient history, these made it into.
Yeah.
Now we're in Japan, February 22nd, or maybe March 24th, 1803. Somewhere in there. Local fishermen reportedly saw a vessel drifting in close by waters. They say when they investigated it, a beautiful young woman they described as having red and white hair and dressed in strange clothes appeared. The fishermen claimed she held a square box that nobody was allowed to touch, and she spoke to them in a language they'd never heard before. Some UFO believers think this story was a credible document of a close encounter of the third kind in Japan. Historians and ethnologists consider it folklore.
Then in 1883, on August 12th, the astronomer Jose Bonilla reported that he saw more than 300 dark unidentified objects crossing the sun disk while observing sunspot activity. At Zacatecas Observatory in Mexico, he was able to take several photographs exposing wet plates at 1/100th of a second. It was subsequently determined that the objects were high-flying geese. It's kind of weird because it's like, what, you didn't know those were birds?
I would think he would have noticed that when he was,
and then reported
his
as, and then went ahead and reported it as UFOs. Is just kind of a little bit bizarre.
Well, then we go to 1940. We're in World War II.
And they're the Foo Fighters, not the band, but that's.
Dave Grohl wasn't there?
No, okay. Dave Grohl wasn't there, and we, this, and that's what they called the UFOs. The pilots, they called them Foo Fighters.
Oh, okay. Well, this saw small metallic spheres and colorful balls of light repeatedly spotted and occasionally photographed worldwide by bomber crews all during World War II.
Yeah, and they think this has come up where they think it's kind of St. Elmo's fire, or a buildup of static electricity on the wings and things, and it would build up and shoot off into this ball. They don't know that it was this or whatever. But in 41 in Missouri, Cape Girardeau, first responders and a Baptist minister allegedly viewed crashed spacecraft and bodies. I don't know if it was crashed on some people or was I don't know if the body's in the spacecraft, but published in 1991 based on the minister's surviving grandchild. So
that must have been a great family story.
Yeah, no.
And then there's the Battle of Los Angeles, which I hear we're going to hear more about in the future.
Yeah, in the future, Robert, our producer, is going to take this. We'll be discussing it with Robert. He likes this topic. There's enough to carry us, I think, through most of an episode. But
well, this was in 1942. Unidentified aerial objects trigger the firing of thousands of anti-aircraft rounds and raise the wartime alert status. That is going to be a very interesting topic.
That was a really phenomenal. It'll be the lead up. We'll discuss a backstory and then a lead up and then whatever we can find out. And because this is LA, we'll be able to get a little, not everything is going to be classified. We'll be able to get to that. In 46,
we're going to Sweden.
We're going to Sweden. Ängelholm, Kristianstads County. Sorry, Sweden. I'm not Sweden. I know you guys are listening, and I apologize for that. Gösta Karlsson reports seeing a flying saucer and its alien passengers. A model of it now is erected at the site.
The UFO Memorial.
At in Ängelholm, and it's actually I've seen a picture of it online, and it's. As they say, the UFOs look like a kid's top, like we saw when we were children. Where they'd wind the thing up and it had that thing sticking up on the top, and it's I guess supposed to be an antenna, although I don't really know why a UFO would really have to have a thing sticking out the top of it. But I don't know how they work anyway, so
Well, in 1947, in Puget Sound, Washington.
Where you've been?
I have been there.
You didn't see any UFOs?
It's a beautiful place, though. No, I was.
Yeah, I've been there too. It's nice.
Gorgeous place. Harold Dahl reported that his dog was killed and his son was injured by debris in an encounter with 4 to 6 flying donut-shaped objects. He also claimed that a witness was subsequently threatened by the men in black. Yeah,
and that's the thing that comes up is that the men in black come up and they try to dissuade you from whatever story you're coming up. They're
got that little thing to make you forget everything. Got that little light.
Yeah, they got that little
I see the little light.
Yeah, that probably doubles as that thing that they smoke pot out of.
That talking pug.
Yeah, and the stories of the men in black, and it's probably just government agents coming to do what they've been trying to do to everybody else. Hey, you didn't see that. That was, swamp gas or whatever. So... Then we, Kenneth Arnold, who we've mentioned, we know his story because we've talked about it probably 3 times throughout the, as we went through the time.
In 1947, then we have Roswell in 1947.
Yeah, 47, the Roswell came up.
And In 48, we go to Kentucky, where a U.S. Air Force sent a fighter pilot to investigate a UFO sighting over Fort Knox, Kentucky. His aircraft crashed, and the pilot was killed while pursuing the UFO. You should not chase them.
Yeah, as in the book I'm reading, Mantell was pursuing this thing up through the clouds. He got separated from the rest of his squadron, and he went up through the clouds. Obviously, this is, they're not going to be able to, our people aren't going to be able to travel at a great deal of speed. But he's chasing this thing, and whatever happened, his plane just disintegrated. They don't know if the thing shot him down, but we haven't really, we haven't yet talked about a time, although we see it on, I don't know how many times we've seen it on a science fiction movie where they're shooting our planes down with these ray guns, or whatever they're using. It's like we have yet, and we've gone through these things, and I've yet to see an instance where, and maybe it's just not reported. Maybe it's like, well, it's top secret. The ray gun shut down our plane, but I don't think that we can't catch them. They're too fast and maneuverable for us to catch them, and it's just probably a nuisance if it's for real, which I think it is. I think it's just a nuisance for them of us. They're looking into something, and we're just badgering them, So it probably, like a little gnat. So it flies up into the sky, up into the clouds, and we might. I would hope that it would have enough telemetry to be able to understand that, or radar to know that our plane's getting close, and maybe it should move so it wouldn't run into it.
Don't let us run into you.
But it might have just slowed down, kind of like when somebody's tailgating.
It's just embarrassing.
They brake stopped him.
Don't brake check by it.
So, I don't know. But I feel bad for the pilot. I don't know. They don't know what happened, and they are not giving up any information at all. So in 48, in New Mexico, another New Mexico, so an alleged retrieval of a grounded UFO and its occupants from a plateau in New Mexico. I mean, can these guys not? I mean, Roswell was 47, right?
Yeah.
And then in 48, another one crashes. I mean, what have they got, like the student pilots?
New Mexico is where they bring everybody to learn how to fly.
They learn how to fly their UFOs, but apparently they're crashing. So I'm assuming everything went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and is stored there in some gigantic warehouse
we need to get you in there.
Indiana Jones. Oh, I'd love to have my way in that place. It would be awesome.
Well, there's again somebody in Chili's in 1948. Chili's and Whitted, who are American commercial pilots, reported that their airplane nearly collided with a UFO.
But again, they nearly collided. The UFO totally got away, but
So in other words, drinking on duty got explained by, it was a UFO, I swear.
Exactly. Well, in 48 again, they call it the Gorman dogfight. A U.S. Air Force pilot sighted and pursued a UFO for 27 minutes. I don't know. The thing might have went, look at this, it's following me.
We're heading for Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Then in 1950, a farm near McMinnville, Oregon, this is another antenna on. A farmer took pictures of a purported flying saucer. These were the first claimed photographs of flying saucers since the coining of the term. And it, again, looks like a top. It's a weird little, of course, grainy, terrible picture that, you can't really, you can tell it's something like a UFO, but,
Well, in Great Falls, Montana, we're up to 1950 now. The manager of Great Falls pro baseball team took color film of two UFOs flying over Great Falls. The film was extensively analyzed by the U.S. Air Force and several independent investigators, but we don't know what they found.
Yeah, I guess we're never going to have an answer.
No report that we know of.
Interesting. So in 51, in Lubbock, Texas, several lights in V-shaped formations were repeatedly spotted flying over the city. Witnesses included professors from Texas Tech University and photographed by a Texas Tech student.
We don't get to see that picture.
No, we don't get to see that one.
So in 1952 in Washington, D.C., there were a series of sightings in July of 52, accompanied radar contacts at three separate airports in the Washington area. The sightings they made front page headlines around the nation and ultimately led to the formation of the Robertson Panel by the CIA.
Yep. You see what happened all prior to that, before we even got a chance to get around to having put together, one of these panels, and you know, they've been doing it for a few years. I think it's again because we were afraid. The government was afraid what was going to happen if we found out what was really going on out there. In 1952, at Haneda Air Force Base in Tokyo, U.S. Air Force tower operators at Haneda Air Force Base observed an unusually bright bluish-white light to their northeast, alerted the GCI radar unit at Shiroi, which then called for a scramble of an F-94 interceptor after getting radar returns in the same general area. GCI ground radar vectored the F-94 to an orbiting unknown target, which the F-94 picked up on the airborne radar. The target then accelerated out of the F-94's radar range after 90 seconds of pursuit. That was followed also on the Shiroi GCI radar.
In 1952, in Flatwoods, West Virginia, 6 local boys and a woman reported seeing a UFO land and saw a spade-headed creature near the landing site.
Oh,
yeah.
You found a creature?
And then, let's see, we're go to 19... Where did I go?
So I want to talk about the 3-headed creature.
Okay, sorry.
We went back in time.
I lost his page.
Stand by. We're going back in time.
I'm not allowed to touch the iPad.
Yeah.
Okay, we've done the baseball team.
Where's the 3-headed creature? Okay, here we go.
This is the spade-headed creature?
Yeah, the spade-headed not 3-headed.
Yeah, we're in Flatwoods, West Virginia.
6 local boys, and what did you read? Seeing the UFO land and saw a spade. I thought this was a 3-headed.
No, it's a spade-headed. And then we go to Rapid City, South Dakota, and Bismarck, North Dakota. Over 2 nights, a red glowing light is witnessed by 45 people. Well, that's pretty interesting.
Then in 1953, the disappearance of Felix Monclay and Robert Wilson, U.S. Air Force pilot and radar operator, and their F-89C disappeared while pursuing an unidentified radar return. Yeah, there's a story that I made note of and won't be able to go over, but basically they were flying over, I think, Lake Superior, and they hit this is the one I'm thinking of, they actually hit Lake Superior. They ran into the UFO, flying saucer, and they both fell into Lake Superior. So they've been trying.
Oh wow!
People have been trying to put together. Someone said that they found the plane and the spacecraft, but I don't know. I think that we would have known by now.
After seeing Lake Superior.
I know.
It's an ocean.
It's like an ocean.
It is.
It's not really a lake. I mean, it is a lake, but it's crazy.
In 1954, Stadio Artemio Franchi in Florence, Italy. Oh, we're going to Italy now. A football game between Fiorentina and Pistoiese was underway at the Stadio Artemio Franchi. Wow. When a group. It's not like I'm just talking fake language.
Italy, sorry.
When a group, I know speak. When a group of UFOs traveling at high speed abruptly stopped over the stadium became silent as the crowd of around 10,000 spectators witnessed the event and described the UFOs as cigar-shaped. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. Then we got 1955, farmhouse near Hopkinsville, Kentucky. After the sighting of a disc-shaped aircraft, a group of strange goblin-like creatures are reported to have repeatedly approached a farmhouse and looked inside through the windows.
Holy crap.
Isn't this that science? Members of the 2 families present shot at them several times with little or no effect. The encounter lasted from evening till dawn.
You're in Kentucky, you're going to get hit.
Yeah, you're going to get shot. Doesn't matter if you're a goblin or not.
That's right. And then in 1956, we go to South Africa, Drakensberg. A well-known photo series depicting a supposed UFO was taken on July 24th near Rosetta in the Drakensberg region. The photographer, meteorologist Elizabeth Clare claimed detailed adventures with an alien race. Besides having had an alien lover, Akon,
hello, Akon,
who would have fathered her son, Ailing. Oh, that's got to be a good story.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. In 1957 at East Anglia, UK. Hi, UK. I know you've been listening in. U.S. Air Force fighter pilot Milton Torres reports that he was ordered to intercept and fire on a UFO displaying a very unusual flight patterns over East Anglia. Yeah, well, when you're flying over East Anglia.
That's a car, right?
Is it Anglia a car?
I thought it was a car.
Yeah. So then we've got, we're going to move up to 1978.
We're in Poland.
And a farmer, Emilson,
in
Emilson, is said to have been abducted and medically examined by short, green-faced humanoid entities speaking an unearthly language in a white hovering humming craft. There is now a memorial at that site. Wow.
And let's see, Victoria, Australia. Contacting air traffic control, an Australian pilot reported seeing a UFO before both he and his aircraft vanished.
Yeah, I have the story on this. This guy was a UFO enthusiast, and it's surmised that he may have committed suicide, or not really suicide. He was trying to make himself disappear and stage this deal. There's a whole, the whole radio conversation between him and the tower he was closest to, were
seem a little staged.
Yeah, it does seem. It does seem just a tad staged, And let's see, in 1981, get a little more modern here.
In France.
In France, retired contractor Renato Nicolai said he saw a flying object shaped like two inverted bowls that left circular traces in the grass.
Oh, crop circles.
Yeah.
Let me see now. In the Soviet Union in 1986, inhabitants of a town, I'm not going to try to pronounce the town, watched a reddish ball which crashed into a mountain known as Height 611.
Maybe it's just 611 feet high. I don't know.
No, that's its name.
Yeah, I haven't seen any downloads from the Soviet Union.
There's Florida.
We go to Florida. 1987 Gulf Breeze UFO incident. Ed Walters, a building contractor, claimed to see a UFO and take photos of it. Interesting.
In 1989, in the Soviet Union, a group of youths claimed to have seen a UFO. Oh, and a three-eyed alien.
Three-eyed alien?
Three-eyed alien.
Oh, that's interesting. In 1990, in Belgium, and I know Belgium, you're out there listening. We got a couple of towns in your area. Reports of large, silent, low-flying black triangles allegedly investigated by Belgium's military, and that's one of the things Bob Lazar said, that they're triangular shaped, three lights on the bottom, which are kind of a power source thing or a power emitter. So the triangular lately, I don't know if they're involved. Like they started with the ones that look like tops now. They're getting newer, like a newer version. Like they're the Corvette. Yeah.
Well, then in 1991, the Space Shuttle Discovery, while in orbit, video was taken during mission STS-48, shows a flash of light and several objects apparently flying in an artificial or controlled fashion. NASA explained them as ice particles reacting to the engine jets.
And so on and so forth, people. Well, there's hundreds and hundreds of sightings. I'm sure many people out there have seen something. I mean, I've seen something unusual as well, although I can't put my hand on it. I didn't report mine. I mean, it looked like a triangle of stars with ships coming out of the stars, but you couldn't see behind it. It was really quite bizarre and unusual, but I didn't feel like I had enough information to really report anything. But this wraps up this episode. Thanks, Deb, for joining us.
Thank you, Doug.
Catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Check us out on Facebook at Alien Probe Podcast and on Instagram at Alien Probe Pod. Send your questions and comments at alienprobepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.